And so here we are again. I've rummaged through my cupboards and my shelving, and I decided, you know what, time to do one of those mainstays of the wargaming world, Napoleonics. Only rather than fielding battalions and regiments and brigades, I figured, do you know what, why not try some skirmish? You know, relive those glorious actions of the Sharp TV series, which, coincidentally, that's going to become Sharp's Rifle Company. Well, Sharp's company with his South Essex Light Company. It's in the works. And it's just one of those other things, once after I've completed painting up my Highlander battalions, because I wanted to add 2 more Highlander battalions to my 1 Highlander battalion, so then I could have the Highlander Brigade, because every wargamer who ever plays the British has probably got more Scots in their armies than there actually were in Scotland at the time. Anyway, moving on to the more pressing things. White coats and blue coats. That's right, the Austrians and the French, because if you're going to play Napoleonic Wars, you kind of need the French. And to be honest, if there's not somebody in the club who's got Austrians, then I guess you're playing Peninsula. Anyway, so as he moves around. First off, I'd just like to go on the actual 2 rule books that I have for this. The original one is this one, Songs of Drums and Shakos, based on the Song of Blades and Heroes, which is a medieval fantasy skirmishing game. 4 or 5 figures is about all you really need per side. Again, you're fighting very much a sort of a warband, a squad level. It is a skirmish. It's 1-to-1, man-to-man. It's very simplistic. Is the wrong word. It's very small. It's very contained sort of forces. However, 6165 is their American Civil War rules, company level, as it says. The idea being that Napoleonics, American Civil War, in the back of this it does contain the updates, or so the changes that you require to run American Civil War skirmish game. However, I'm being an insane lunatic that I am, wanted to do the other way around, because otherwise I can't play Sharp and his South Essex Light Company. Hey, I'm just weird like that. And it's a good chance to basically buy a couple of boxes of figures, as that's pretty much 1 box of Victrix and a few Perry's Frenchmen running around. And over the other side we have about maybe a dozen or so, a dozen, maybe a little bit over a dozen Austrian troops, and the guys out of a Victrix box. I still have got the box with most of the with about, I'd say, a third of the figures for the Austrians left over, so I could make up more troops onto this. I could add in more sections, that it would require me to make up more officers and more sergeants. However, I'll get into that one in a little bit. So let us go with the French. So starting with the skirmish line, we have a 9-man, I can't count. Somebody remembers his issues with BMP, with not being able to count 10 BMPs. 9-man skirmish section, essentially broken down into pairs. Now, the company rules, the way they work it for the American Civil War, is that for every section that you field, so every team, so for example that would be a section of 6 men, you would get 2 skirmishers. Now, me being the special child that I am, I basically went, that's an awful lot of skirmishers, I don't want to have that many, I'd rather have more the sections of line infantry and things like that. So I kind of just made up a small group of skirmishers, including an NCO who can lead them, and basically just left them to it. As I said again, these are a mixture of the Victrix multi-pose figures. Let me just double check. These 2 are the Victrix. He is a Perry's, as is his comrade. He's a Perry's. He's a Victrix. In fact, hang on. Nope. Yep. They are both Perry's from the skirmisher set for their elite skirmishing, and as are these 2. The NCO is made up from bits from the Victrix pack. So onto the line troops. So I have 6 groups of 6, each comprises of 5 infantry and a NCO, as you require a corporal. The corporal's job essentially is to rally off any figures that run. Otherwise he has no other real effect in this game. So as you can see, that's second group, third group with the corporal. The corporals are always this guy, they're always here, always in this spot. He's kneeling with his team and a mixture of poses, firing and marching. The sort of advancing figures are usually, so these two here, so these two here again are a pair of the Perry's infantry, and the remaining 4 in that section are Victrix. Next up are the officers and NCOs of the company. So here we have one of the 3 sergeants, as you essentially need 1 officer, 1 to 2 senior NCOs supporting them for every sort of 2 to 3 sections that you run. This is, where are you? This is our lieutenant. You can tell that because I actually managed to do his shoulder. I don't know if that can see that sort of properly. I think I did it right. He is the senior of the 2 lieutenants in the company. Another sergeant. I'll just adjust him so yeah, you can see he's got his correct markings, everything on his arms, at least as far as I'm aware they're the correct markings. And we have our young Sous Lieutenant, which is the junior of the group. And then the 3rd sergeant. And moving into the middle we have the company commander. 2 musicians, 1 in imperial colours, 1 in the earlier blue. The pioneer sergeant, he is part of the Perry's command pack, and then 6 grenadiers who also include a corporal. These guys are all Victrix. The lieutenants, the officers, sergeants are all made from the Victrix packs. Of the 2 musicians, the one in imperial colours, with his green coat, is the Victrix. There's the Perry's figure. The others are Victrix, and then here we have a eagle party. So officer, 2 porter egaliers, eagle bearer who is from Perry's, and 2 drummers. Everyone else, the eagle bearer is a Perry's figure. Everyone else is made up from the Victrix packs. I'll just do a quick sweep around. So we have grenadiers, a pioneer, command group, and then sections of 6 infantrymen, each including an NCO, backed by a sergeant, and then 1 of the 2 lieutenants. Give me a second, I'll just adjust this section here so you can see them a little bit more in their glory. Maybe see the corporal's ranking on his shoulder, on his arm. Out of these guys, you can see them a little bit closer. They are excluding. One second. These are all the Victrix figures, and he is the Perry's figure. So he's metal. Everyone else is plastic. I'll just put them all back. Okay, and then moving across to the enemies of the French, the Austrians, because I don't actually have any other Austrian forces in my vast Napoleonic collection. So I decided to do this. Jaegers are my skirmishers for this force, though I only have 6 of them because that's all you get in a my table jiggling, because you only get 6 in a pack. These are all from Perry's. And then we have the infantry sections, or the infantry. These are expanded out to 7 men. The odd man is the NCO. No rank markings or anything like on these guys. They essentially just have, it is, one second, I just knock men over. On the rear, the standard infantryman, see if I can get this into the light. Standard infantrymen have a bayonet, whereas an NCO, whether they be a corporal or above, has a sword as well, or short sword, or short sword. So with the Austrians, I went with, granted, only one-man bigger sections, but still they give them a little bit more staying power. Corporals again, same job. They just act as a rally marker for your troops. One big difference here, I will say, about the figures is between the Perry's ones, which are this one and this one, compared to the Victrix figures, is that the Perry's figures come with the little acorn leaves in their helmets, whereas the Victrix figures don't have that. You would either have to add it with putty yourself, or, as I've done, just sort of ignore it. There are a couple of other slight differences. The Perry's figures tend to have water bottles and things like that, whereas the Victrix figures don't. They're a little bit light on certain details and items, though I'm not overly fussed by that. On to the second rank, the supporting them. So we have sergeants. This one is, he is my Victrix. He's the one I made up for the Victrix. A sergeant in the Austrian army is essentially marked by his cane, which you can see he's holding his hand alongside his sling. This is the young Unterleutnant. And we have another sergeant. Again, cane is firmly there on display, so you can beat the soldiers into position and into line. The third sergeant, and then the Oberleutnant, so the senior lieutenant of the company. We then have the command group. In this case, it's a little bit bigger. Pioneer, 2 drummers. If I remember rightly, he is the Victrix. This one's the Perry's. This is the Perry's commander figure, and then we have my Hauptmann. I'll just adjust him around slightly. That's the Hauptmann for the company. And I'll just give you a nice little view of the flagpole. Yes, I painted that myself by hand. I like it. I don't care. If someone's going to complain about the way it's done, it's like, I put the effort in. Leave me alone. We then have the grenadier section. The sergeant, or I should say the corporal on the end. So the end, yeah, the corporal. I think it is corporal, spelled with a K, is a Victrix figure. The remainder in this are from the Perry's figures, so they're all solid metal. So with Song of Drums and Shakos, you will need essentially maybe this many figures with perhaps a couple of extras bolted on. And that is a coherent combat force, so you have an officer to lead it, an NCO is your second NCO, you don't have to have one, a group of infantrymen, and then some skirmishers, if you choose to. Or you can have your grenadiers, and so on. Now, what a friend of mine, because he got into this as well, what he found when he went rummaging around to see how people were setting up their armies was that they generally tended to pick a unit. So, for example, with the French, it would be a Laguerre battalion, and all the troops that they would field would just be light infantry, would be skirmishers, or would be all essentially from the same unit, so they all had the same abilities. And anyway, some units, again, light infantry and grenadier units are going to be more expensive on the figures. You can run Old Guard. You're just not going to get many of them on the field because they are, in a literal word, they are terrifying and they have all the bonuses. They are very tough fighters. I have played against somebody who ran a pair of Old Guardsmen on the field alongside a group of more generic line infantry, and the Old Guard basically just refused to die while the line infantry ended up running away in the end, because I basically went, I'm not fighting them, I'm just going to pick on those guys. And the old Guard did as they did, they stood there and they took the punishment and doled it out massively against my poor Austrian infantry. What I have done with this, in sort of keeping with it, is these are a infantry battalion. Off the top of my head, I forget the name. I did pick one, but they are essentially, it's based around the idea of an infantry company. It's just a small group of the grenadiers, and the skirmishers are essentially there as a little extra to have for when I play 61-65. So I've got that little extra. But essentially they're not really needed for again playing this one, Songs of Drums and Shako. Run that, maybe a few extra guys with an officer and NCO, and you've got a coherent combat force. Volley firing also is a thing in that, and the more men you have volley firing, the more effective your shooting is. They take pot shots at people. They put a burst of fire into people. That's the way the game runs, and it is very, very effective. If you want to run just nothing but skirmishes, you can. They are going to be a little bit more expensive, but they are, I want to say, to a certain extent, they may be a little bit more controllable, or a little bit more in the idea of what people sort of see as a skirmish game, whereas marching around in little columns and forming line and things like that with 6 or 7 men may seem a bit odd, but it works, and it works very, very well. I believe I have done a video where it was the Austrians versus the light screen plus some extras. That was pretty much how the game ran. That's Songs of Drums and Shakos. I haven't gotten around to running a 6165 properly yet. I have got American Civil War figures, so I have tried to run this one on my own. It was a bit of a solo game. I really need to try again at some point. But hey, that's me. With the Austrians, off the top of my head, I generally remember that they are done up as the Großdeutsch, as the Hoch- und Deutschmeister, or the Imperial Austrian Army, as it was, with some Jaegers as backup, and Grenadiers from the Grenadier Company attached. Just do a bit of the back shots of all the figures. So again, I've tried to stick with what they are. If I field them as a company, it's more than likely the Grenadiers will not really be fielded, though the skirmishers will. And like I said, I haven't actually managed to get this off the ground yet properly, even with myself doing solo play or anything like that. It's a little bit more effort to play 6165, in my opinion, than it is to play drums and Shakos, and trying to work out the command chain. So as I've laid them all out here, I will try and get it. So using the Austrians. So the skirmishers we won't worry about too much, because in the game rules it is for every section you field you should have two skirmishers. I've kind of just ignored that. I could add them in, I could add extra skirmishers, but at the moment I've just gone, Austrians weren't renowned for skirmishing. They could, but it's not something they're in, and I'm just sort of going, do you know what, it saves me the time and the effort of painting up figures. Not the best example, but hey, I'm going with it. Just this is a passion project of mine. Just leave me alone. So you'll have a section. Minimum is normally 2 to 3 sections of infantry. Anything for, I believe that the minimum you want to be fielding is 6 figures, which will include, so for example, an NCO plus 5. Anything below that, it tends to be very, very fragile. As you're, even in 6165, you're moving the sections round and fighting and volley firing rather than moving as a big line or anything like that. It's the skirmishers' job to move as individuals. It's the line infantry's job to basically put the weight of fire in. You have your NCOs, sergeants, who you need so many of. Now, I think I am missing a senior sergeant for each of my companies. It's something I will have to double check. Though I may not be, as I can use, for example, he could be the senior sergeant, so he would be sort of further back in the chain of command, while the 2 sergeants, Feldwebels, would be with the lieutenants, the Unterleutnants and the lieutenant, and basically look after the sections of infantry. You probably find that this will be split into 2. This would normally be split into 2 platoons of 3 sections apiece. The Grenadiers will be a separate element, as with the skirmishers, and then the command group is essentially these guys. The Pioneer, somewhat ignored. He's more of a figure for the use in Songs and Drums and Shakos. He is essentially, and then what you do is you trace your line of command from the NCOs. Hang on. So yeah, you trace your line of command from the NCOs to the sergeant. In theory, he would then trace it to the master, to the senior sergeant. So we'll order to the senior sergeant, for example, him, and then on to the lieutenants to then trace it to the captain at the back, who will be moving around with a little command group. Just as a quick point, the Eagle Party is purely me using up the figures that I had, and I just felt like making an Eagle Party because it's useful for Songs and Drums and Shakos, or for games of 6165 as an objective for the Austrians to try and take. I mean, who doesn't want to capture an eagle? Let's see, anything else? Yeah, the bulk of these, again, onto the figures themselves. Yes, the Stella Artois twin is what the French live in when they're on my shelf. The Austrians get just a generic brown box that I had. As I said, this is a bit of a passion project of mine. This is something that I'm doing. I built the two sides because I wanted to. It is very much my thing. There isn't really anybody else who got involved in it, because it's one of those things which if it appeals, it appeals. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Most people would say, the Napoleonics and the giant tower there is what most people would rather do. They'd rather field armies. But again, the ability to play smaller games, narrative games and things like that is something that appealed to me because it was just different. I like my skirmish games because you don't necessarily need more. This one expanded, but we'll probably not really expand much beyond this. So unless anyone has any questions, please drop them down into the comments below, and I'm more than happy to try and answer them as best I can. I can thoroughly recommend Song of Drums and Shakos as a fun little skirmish game. You can play pretty much all the major nations. I'm not too sure if they ever did release any other extras for it, giving you the smaller nations like the Portuguese, the Spanish, Americans and things like that, though they do all the major nations, the Russians, the Prussians, the Austrians, the British, the French. And I think for the moment that will do. So, as said, if you have any questions or any comments about this, please drop them drop them below the video. And I think I'm doing something a bit more modern in the next one. I've got a list. I'll check it at some point. Goodbye.